crane tower alone on the sea. You became the light on the dark side of me.
Populations with Special Health Needs, Part 2, by Professor Tammy. Minorities, Racial, Ethnicity. In 1997, the U.S. Office of Management and Budget, OMB, included race and ethnicity to reflect diversity. African American, Asian, American Indian, Alaska Native, Native Hawaiian, or other Pacific Islander, and white. OMB include Hispanic and Latino ethnicities. Healthcare experiences were more different. They didn't have the same type of privilege as some of their white counterpart because maybe they were more economically disadvantaged or even with communications. So some of the things that these minorities experienced were social economic status. They didn't have money or the status, power. Language ability. They may not have spoken the same language as the healthcare worker, or cultural behaviors. Because sometimes people may speak the same language as you, but they may not understand your culture, your hand gestures, the way you use the language, the slang of the culture too, or even any other body languages that would be more discreet and understanding from another person's culture, and also just the lifestyle of the minority group. Racial ethnic minorities tend to be poor, so they have poor access, receive poor quality care, and have greater deficit in health status. And it could be because of the healthcare experiences that they have. And it also could be a lot through money, communication, and just understanding them. Women and children. Women's life expectancies versus men. Women tend to live longer than men overall. If you look at the graph on the right-hand side, you'll see that women live a couple years longer than men. Women tend to have heart disease and stroke, AIDS, and mental illness more than men. Morbidity and poor health outcomes. There's the Office of Research on Women's Health, which goes through the National Institute of Health, the NIH. Children's health have unique aspects of delivery. They tend to be more developmentally vulnerable because they're still growing and they're not fully independent. And there's also patterns of morbidity and mortality. And a lot of times it's how they're being treated and how they're regarded. I don't know if you ever heard of the old saying, children are to be seen but not heard. I kind of grew up with that philosophy, but I don't believe it. Children are increasingly affected by new morbidity, such as drugs and alcohol abuse, maybe because they might live with family that have drug and alcohol abuse, family and neighbor violence, maybe they are always arguing, emotional disorders, maybe there is unsteadiness on how they're being treated or what they're seeing, and learning problems too. So I just want to explain morbidity and mortality. Morbidity deals with illness, being sick. Mortality deals with dying. So just think of the word mortal. Mortal means someone who doesn't live forever. Geographic distribution of rural health. There's poverty. People usually don't have as much money there. Geographic maldistribution, shortage of healthcare professions. Where do most of the doctors who graduate from medical school want to go to? To the big city to make more money. So not many doctors usually become traveling doctors and visit from one small town or village to the other. And when you meet these doctors, they usually fly on a bush plane or helicopter and go from one small town for a couple of days. Sometimes they sleep in the cafeteria of the school. And, after they're done checking the people up to make sure they're okay, doing their regular routine, they go to the next village and do their regular routine to make sure the people in these rural areas are okay. So sometimes in rural areas, you have poor health delivery, probably because you don't always have a hospital. Let's just say someone had an accident in this rural village. What are they going to do if they broke their leg? They probably have to be medevac. So usually they're taken to another location, another city by helicopter or by plane. And then they are flown there to receive more health care or better health care. So some of the barriers that we spoke about are getting from one place to another. So sometimes, like, if it is snowing very hard and you have like over 6 feet of snow, I think that would be a little difficult to get to a hospital. As we know with some past snowstorms, sometimes the ambulance have gotten stuck in the middle of the street and couldn't get to someone who needed medical care. So what are the things that you think will help improve access in rural America? What's your plan? Should we have more people? Should we have more portable medical technology? Should we still have a doctor or healthcare worker in each village just to make sure the basic needs are being available for these 200 people or even 100 people? What do you think? Social economic status. Social economic status. You look at the social position, access to resources, variation in health status, income, education, employment status, and occupation. So when you think about it, the more money, the more power you have, the more influence you have with getting better health care versus if you didn't have money, you didn't have power, you didn't have education, or you didn't have a steady employment, or what's your position in your occupation, how will you be treated? Uninsured. A lot of times people talk about the uninsured, people who don't have health insurance. You should also include people who are underinsured, those who don't even have good health insurance. I was a victim of that one, so I can totally tell you that one time I went to play paintball, and one of the paintball hit my finger, and then it just couldn't move, probably because it hit a nerve. I called so many doctors and said, I will even pay by cash if you would see me. I'm very worried about my finger. No one would take my health insurance because they just didn't accept that type of health insurance. So luckily, I had a friend who was doing a speech at a hospital, and I went to visit her. She was a good friend and still is a good friend of mine. And she was speaking to the younger doctors about health emergency medicine. And these ER doctors were just listening to her very attentively. And afterwards, they found out I was her friend. So we were talking and I was showing them my finger, and they just said, we gotta fix that finger. And they gave me something to hold my finger, like a little cast, so I can use it and reuse it too. So I really appreciated it because I felt that even though I was insured, I had really bad insurance and no one would accept it. So this is really important. So when you look at your or purchase health insurance, you want to make sure you have good or good enough health insurance. So let's go back to this slide. uninsured. They tend to be poor and less educated. They work in part-time jobs or are employed in small firms that, are not required to provide health insurance based on the number of people who are employed. And if you tend to work for someone and you're consulting, even though they may have 200 employees, but if you're part-time, you're still part-time under certain hours, they're not obligated to provide health insurance for you. And a lot of the people who are not insured are younger. They tend to be between the age of 25 and 40, and also ethnic minorities. Homelessness. The homeless face several barriers to adequate and appropriate health care. They have financial barriers, not enough money, problems in satisfying eligible requirements for health insurance, probably because they don't have an address, transportation, getting from one place to the other, and it also costs money too. Lack of sanitation, you don't see public bathrooms everywhere for everyone to use in the city, especially. Versus when we have our own home, we have a bathroom, a toilet we can use anytime we need to. A stable place to store medicine, or even refrigeration to store the medicine, and an inability to buy or get nutritious foods, or even make nutritious food, cook nutritious food. The federal initiative is to eliminate social economic disparities. And there's another thing I want to mention. When we think of homelessness, we think of people who sleep in the street. Homelessness actually means people who don't have a steady place to live. It could be someone who is traveling or living at a place, their friend's place, for a couple weeks, and then they're living at another friend's place for a couple weeks, and then another friend's place for another couple of weeks. So that's homelessness because they don't have a home. They're a permanent home. Remember to read the book.